Ukraine is purchasing 70 American ATACMS surface-to-surface ballistic missiles, 12 multiple launch rocket systems, and tens of thousands of cluster artillery shells from Turkey. The U.S. Department of State has informed Congress that it is prepared to authorize the transfer of these weapons to Ukraine, according to the official record of the United States Congress for August 6th. The fact is that Ankara can only transfer American weaponry to Kyiv after receiving official consent from Washington. Congress has 15 days to review the State Department's notification. Meanwhile, Ukraine is developing its own ballistic and anti-ballistic program under the Freyja project, and the first results are expected as early as this year. How is the country strengthening its defense capabilities? Let's find out. In addition to the supply of American weaponry from Turkey, Ukraine has also reached an agreement with the United States for the regular replenishment of supplies for Patriot systems. Missiles will be arriving monthly, Volodymyr Zelensky announced, but Kyiv is also looking for additional opportunities. Germany and Poland possess significant stockpiles of such missiles, the head of state reported. And in parallel, Ukraine is working with the Netherlands, Northern European countries, and other states that have already joined in supplying ammunition for Ukrainian air defense.
Who has anti-missiles and systems? First and foremost, a manufacturer, the United States of America. Can I help? We are working on it. Will they supply us with missiles monthly? Yes. We have agreements. Are these missiles enough? No.
Russia's war against Ukraine has forced a reconsideration of the very approaches to weapons production. Against the backdrop of a sharply increased need for ammunition, the Pentagon has called on American manufacturers to increase their pace and replenish stocks faster. As reported by ABC News, U.S. Department of Defense Representative Sean Parnell stated that the agency is accelerating procurement so that weaponry arrives in the necessary volumes. According to him, this work is already intensified and has become part of a larger-scale modernization of the American defense industry.
Multi-year development cycles are unacceptable. We must significantly accelerate our timelines and expand production capacity right now. Sean Parnell, a spokesperson for the U.S. Department of Defense, from an ABC News report.
Europe is ready to get more actively involved in finding additional supplies of the weaponry needed by Kyiv. The head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, has already called on European Union countries to transfer more interceptor missiles to Kyiv. In general, this mechanism works like this. Ukraine forms a list of current needs, and partners look for opportunities to fulfill them.
Ukraine analyzes the situation on the battlefield, determines its needs, and presents a so-called supply plan. We study this plan and act based on it. So it is quite possible that Ukraine will request, for example, interceptors or related equipment, and then we'll be able to consider this issue. Thus, the exchange of information continues. Supply plans are still coming in and contracts are still being concluded. We review them extremely promptly and then make the corresponding payments.
And support for Ukraine today is already far more than just individual weapons shipments. NATO countries are building an entire system of training, supply, equipment maintenance, and coordination. For 2026 alone, allies have earmarked about 70 billion euros for the training of Ukrainian military personnel and military equipment. The same amount is also set aside for the following year. And the reason is clear. Investments in Ukraine equal the security of Europe, both now and in the future.
Now Ukraine has a unified coordination mechanism for support. We have the necessary capabilities, we have the expertise, training, maintenance, equipment supply, and of course assistance to Ukrainian forces by providing them with support so they can focus on immediate combat operations. Mike Keller, Deputy Commander of the NATO Security Assistance and Training for Ukraine mission, from the NATO and Ukraine Facebook post.
But all of this is only one side of the coin. In Kyiv, they long ago reached the conclusion, without developing their own defense industrial base, without producing modern and advanced weaponry on an industrial scale, it is impossible to manage. And this is not just about drone technologies, in which Ukraine has long held a leading position in the market. The Ukrainian company Firepoint has announced that serial production of the fluorine monophosphide 7X anti-ballistic interceptor missile could start by the end of August. It will be used in the pan-European anti-ballistic program Freyja. 10 of Kyiv's partner states have already joined this initiative. The plan is as follows. Ukraine develops and produces its own missile and launcher, while partners handle radars, sensors, and other critical components. According to Volodymyr Zelensky, the first concrete results should appear as early as the turn of 2026 to 2027. In other words, Ukraine wants to implement in record time a system that took other nations decades to create.
How is the Freyja project being developed? These are our Ukrainian launchers, along with the missiles, a homing head from the company Diehl Defense in Germany, and the necessary radars. It is a complete and integrated system. These are major industry players like Hensoldt, Weibel, or perhaps Indra, along with several other key companies from across Europe. There are about 10 of them in total, all actively participating in this collaborative project with various specialized components to ensure that the final system is truly super effective and reliable.
But it is one thing to shoot down Russian missiles, and quite another to deprive Russia of the ability to launch them. That is why Ukraine is developing not only anti-ballistic defense, but also its own strike capabilities. And the logic here is obvious. The more launchers, depots, production facilities, and other elements of Russian missile infrastructure Ukraine can strike, the fewer targets will ultimately have to be intercepted over Ukrainian cities. That is precisely why Kiev is accelerating the development of its own ballistics and proposing that partners move toward joint weapons production. Moreover, this is no longer just about the security of Ukraine itself. The experience, technologies, and new systems gained over the years of war will become part of pan-European defense.
This brings us to the only truly relevant conclusion that we have reached, specifically in the context of our ongoing experience of countering these complex Russian ballistic attacks. And that conclusion is quite clear. We must urgently transition to an active phase of operations. We need to move beyond simple interception and fully commit to an active, robust defense strategy. This refers specifically to the systematic destruction of key industrial facilities where Russia produces critical components for ballistic missiles and launchers. The primary objective here is to preemptively neutralize their manufacturing capabilities in order to prevent even the slightest possibility of future mass strikes on Ukrainian territory.
The first combat use of the new Ukrainian ballistic missile could take place as early as this autumn, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced. But one successful launch is not yet serial production. Most of the components in the missile are Ukrainian, however, certain critical parts have to be obtained from abroad. Therefore, for mass production, we need not only the finished technology and domestic capacity, but also stable contracts, funding, and guaranteed supplies of components from partners, the head of state added. Simply put, Ukraine is already capable of creating a missile. The next task is to ensure that there's a large quantity of such ammunition, and that dependence on external supplies does not slow down the pace of their production.
As for mass deployment, I can't say anything, because there are factors that do not depend on Ukraine. It's like with the Russians' ballistics. There are components from other countries there. It's the same with our ballistics. There aren't many, but there are still some things from other countries.
The war that Putin expected to wage exclusively on Ukrainian territory has long since returned to the Russian Federation along with Ukrainian drones. The next stage could be Ukrainian ballistics, and the longer the Kremlin refuses to negotiate an end to the war, the greater the consequences it will face.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.